The blue lights hit your rearview mirror before your brain even catches up. Your stomach tightens. You glance at your speed, then at your mirrors again, just to be sure. Yep, it's you. You slow down, signal, and pull over. Engine idling. Hands suddenly feel awkward on the steering wheel. You can already see the officer stepping out of the cruiser, adjusting something on their belt, walking toward your vehicle with that calm, unreadable expression. Now imagine this. Instead of stopping you on the road, that same officer pulls into your driveway, or steps onto your property, or walks around your car parked at your house, without asking, without a warrant, without clear explanation. That's where things shift from a routine stop to something a lot more serious, and a lot more misunderstood. Let me ask you something right away. Have you ever had a police officer step onto your property or approach you in a place where you thought you had full privacy, and you weren't sure what you were actually allowed to say or do? Drop your answer in the comments because your experience matters here. And stay with me because later on I'm going to break down a specific mistake people make in that exact situation that quietly destroys their legal position without them even realizing it. Now let's get into it. Most people assume their property is a kind of invisible shield. Your driveway, your front yard, your porch. It feels like your space, your rules. And in many ways that instinct isn't wrong. But the law doesn't treat all parts of your property the same way, and officers know that. There's a concept called the knock and talk. Officers use it all the time. It allows them to walk up to your front door, just like a delivery driver or a neighbor would, and attempt to speak with you. They don't need a warrant for that. They don't even need suspicion of a crime. That's why you'll sometimes see officers casually walking up driveways or paths. But here's where people get tripped up. That permission is extremely limited. It doesn't give officers free rein to wander your property, peer into windows, circle your backyard, or start inspecting things without cause. And yet, in real life, those lines get blurred constantly. Picture this scenario. You're at home. Your car is parked in your driveway. Maybe you just got back from work. Maybe you're unloading groceries. An officer pulls up, steps out, and instead of stopping at the front door, they start walking toward your vehicle. Maybe they're looking inside. Maybe they're checking something around it. At that moment, your instincts kick in, but your mind is racing. Do you stay quiet? Do you walk over? Do you confront them? Do you cooperate? This is where that simple phrase comes in, and it matters more than most people realize. I do not consent to any searches or trespassing on my property. That's it. Simple, calm, clear. And no, it's not about being aggressive. It's not about escalating the situation. It's about setting a boundary in a way that is legally meaningful. Because here's the truth most people never hear. Silence alone is not always enough. A lot of people think if they just stand there quietly, they're protecting themselves. But from an officer's perspective, silence can be interpreted in different ways. It doesn't clearly communicate that you are refusing consent. And consent, real or implied, is one of the biggest loopholes in everyday police encounters. Officers are trained to look for it. They listen for hesitation. They watch your body language. They notice if you step aside, if you gesture toward something, if you say, "I guess that's fine," or even just shrug. Those tiny moments can later be described as permission. Now let's slow this down because this is where things get tense. The officer looks up from your car and notices you watching. Maybe they walk over. Maybe they say something like, "Hey, just checking something out. Mind if I take a look?" That question is not casual, it's strategic. And here's the trap. The tone is friendly, almost conversational. It doesn't feel like a legal moment, but it is. If you respond casually, yeah, I guess that's okay," you've just given them exactly what they need. On the other hand, if you snap back aggressively, you risk escalating the situation unnecessarily. Tone matters more than people think. Officers are constantly reading you, not just for safety, but for control of the interaction. So when you say, "I do not consent to any searches or trespassing on my property," you're doing something very specific. You're removing ambiguity. You're drawing a line that is hard to reinterpret later. And here's the part people don't expect. The officer might not stop. That's where things get uncomfortable. They might continue asking questions. They might shift tone slightly. Maybe they become more authoritative. Maybe they say something like, "Well, if you've got nothing to hide, this shouldn't be a problem." That phrase alone has pressured thousands of people into giving up their rights. Let's be honest for a second. That line works because it hits emotionally. Nobody wants to look guilty. Nobody wants to appear uncooperative. In that moment, your brain starts trying to fix the situation socially, not legally. And that's exactly what gets people into trouble. Because the law doesn't care about how cooperative you felt. It cares about what you allowed. Now imagine a slightly different scenario. You're inside your house. You hear a knock. You look through the window and see an officer. You step outside, maybe closing the door behind you. That detail alone, stepping outside, can change the entire dynamic. Why? Because now you voluntarily left the stronger privacy protection of your home and entered a more public interaction space. The officer starts asking questions. Maybe it's about a neighbor. Maybe it's about something vague. Then they ask, "Mind if I come in and take a quick look?" Again, tone is calm, casual, almost friendly. This is where people freeze. They don't want to say no. It feels confrontational. So they hesitate. They say something unclear. Or worse, they step aside. That physical movement, stepping aside, can be interpreted as consent. And once that happens, you've lost a significant layer of protection. That's why the phrase matters so much. It's not about memorizing legal jargon. It's about having something ready when your brain is under pressure. I do not consent to any searches or trespassing on my property. Say it calmly. Say it once. Don't argue. Don't over-explain. Because here's another mistake people make. They start talking too much. They try to justify their refusal. They say things like, "It's just that I've heard things about searches," or "I don't feel comfortable because," or "I'm just trying to protect myself." Every extra word creates room for the conversation to continue. It gives the officer more to work with. Officers are trained conversationalists. They know how to keep you talking. They know how to reframe questions. They know how to make you feel like saying yes is the easiest way out. And in the moment, it often feels that way. But that ease is temporary. The consequences can last much longer. Let's talk about another situation that catches people off guard. An officer pulls up while you're sitting in your car in your own driveway. Maybe the engine is off. Maybe you're on your phone. They approach the vehicle and start asking questions. "Where are you coming from? Have you been drinking? Mind if I take a look inside the car?" Now you're in this weird gray zone. You're on your property, but you're inside a vehicle, which has different legal standards. This is where people start blending roadside habits with property rights, and that confusion can cost them. They answer questions automatically. They hand over documents even when not required. They agree to searches because it feels like a normal traffic stop. But it's not a traffic stop, and that difference matters. If you're not being lawfully detained, you have more control than you think. But here's the catch. You have to assert it correctly. That same phrase applies. Calm, clear, and controlled. I do not consent to any searches or trespassing on my property. And then something important, something most people forget. You stop talking. Because once you've made your position clear, continuing to engage casually can blur that line again. Now let's get into something that might surprise you. Sometimes officers already know they're pushing the boundary. They're testing, watching, seeing how you respond. If you're unsure, hesitant, overly talkative, or eager to please, that signals something very different than someone who calmly and clearly asserts their rights. It doesn't mean they'll back off immediately, but it changes the dynamic. Confidence, real, controlled confidence, carries weight. Not arrogance, not aggression, just clarity. There's another layer to this that doesn't get talked about enough. Timing. When you say something matters almost as much as what you say. If you wait too long, if you let the officer already begin searching, already start moving through your space, your objection can become weaker. It's still better than nothing, but early, clear refusal is always stronger. That's why you don't wait for the situation to feel serious. By then, it usually already is. And here's where I want to circle back to something I mentioned earlier, the mistake that quietly ruins people's cases. It's not yelling, it's not resisting, it's not even arguing. It's cooperating halfway. That middle ground, where you're uncomfortable but still going along with things, that's where most people lose control of the situation. They think they're being reasonable. They think they're keeping things calm. But legally, that gray area can be interpreted as consent. And once something is framed as consensual, it becomes much harder to challenge later. That's why clarity matters more than politeness. You can be respectful and still be firm. You can be calm and still refuse. Those things are not opposites, even though they feel like it in the moment. Now imagine the officer pauses after you say the phrase. There's a moment of silence. Maybe they look at you differently. Maybe the tone shifts slightly. That silence is pressure, and a lot of people rush to fill it. They start talking again. They try to smooth things over. That's exactly what you don't want to do. Silence, after a clear statement, is powerful. It signals that you're not negotiating. You've already made your position known. From there, whatever the officer does next becomes their responsibility, not yours. And that distinction can matter later in ways most people don't see in the moment. Now, none of this guarantees that the situation will feel comfortable. It won't. Real-world encounters rarely match what people imagine when they think about rights and laws. There's tension. There's uncertainty. There's that constant feeling that one wrong move could make things worse. And sometimes, even when you do everything right, the situation still escalates. But here's the difference. You're not making it easier for your rights to be bypassed. You're not handing over control without realizing it. You're not turning a questionable situation into a clearly consensual one. That's the line that matters. Because once that line is crossed, it's incredibly hard to walk it back. So the next time you see those lights, or hear that knock, or notice someone stepping onto your property without clear permission, your mind won't be scrambling for words. You'll already have them. Simple, calm, controlled. And in a moment where everything feels uncertain, that might be the one thing that keeps you grounded while everything else is shifting around you.